We will be in a moment here. Just wait for the video to show up. Already going, really. Hi, everybody. It's a bit of a delay, but that's okay. We're waiting for our screens to come up so we know that we're broadcasting you guys. There we go. See? Oh, somebody doesn't have me muted. There we go. All right, guys. So that was Garrett Fuller. This is Bill Murphy with MMORPG.com. And we are live streaming with the Funcom dev team here on MMORPG.com's Twitch channel. That's twitch.tv/MMORPG.com. Well, you know what? I'm just going to turn it over to the Funcom guys, and they can introduce themselves and tell us all about what they do on Age of Conan Unchained before we get into all this glorious new content.
Okay, welcome, and thanks for having us. My name's Craig Morrison. I'm the executive producer and game director on Age of Conan, and I have two of our designers here who are responsible for the content that you're going to get to see through today, and we'll talk a little bit about what goes on in the minds of developers as they make content for players. So if you guys want to introduce yourselves.
Sure. My name is Peter Lavoie-Mescut. I am a gameplay designer here at Funcom.
And I'm Jean Pellerin, AI designer.
And what does an AI designer do?
An AI designer is taking care of all the scripts and the monster behavior.
So the brains.
The brains.
You put
scripts.
the brains into the mobs.
Yeah. Combat.
Okay. And what we're going to be looking at today is this is actually the first reveal of new content from the new free content updates. They're going to be coming for players over the course of the rest of this year and into early next year, which is the Secrets of Dragonspine. And we're going to take a look at one of the new areas from Dragonspine and talk a little bit about the kind of, I guess, the ideas behind designing dungeons for groups and MMO play, and what it is that the designers look at when they're going through and making this content. So this will be free game updates for our premium players. So this is actually a departure for us. I'm sure you guys know, the last time we did this with the Savage Coast of Tehran and Rise of God, those have been paid expansions under the old business model. And now, I think the MMO space is evolving. And what we've decided to do is the game content updates and the content for players, the new playable areas, the new dungeons, the new systems, those will be completely free for our premium players to enjoy, so they won't have to pay extra to access this content. Okay.
So what are we looking at right now? Where are we right here?
Okay, so
we're at the entrance of the Sepulchre of the Worm, which is a group dungeon we worked on for Dragonspine. As an added little bonus here, you get to see armor set that is planned for this release as well.
So this is the medium set that the character's wearing?
This is the medium armor set.
And so you can kind of see in the armor set design as well that this is where, so this area in Hyboria, anyone who knows Howard's world, Robert E. Howard's world of Conan is kind of based on the real world. And one of the areas that we had in the original, the launch of the original game is in Stygia, which is kind of Howard's version of ancient Egypt. And so in this, Dragonspine, this area called the Dragonspine, and it exists kind of on the border between Stygia and a country called Kashan. And you can see in the armor, it's kind of still got the Egyptian influence, but it's also bringing more of a kind of tribal African influence into things. So it's very different from the kind of very pure Egyptian Stygia that you saw in the original content. We've got a much more kind of tribal feel to a lot of the stuff that is being designed. So this is one of the armor sets that the guys are working on at the moment, and the artists will kill me if I don't say it's not quite finished yet. I think it looks awesome. But the artists are always like, oh man, don't show that, it's not quite done yet. And then you're like, but it looks awesome!
Well, it does look great.
Yeah. And you'll have noticed when Jean was wandering over there by the fire earlier, one of the cool things that we've been doing with the players over the course of the summer is kind of releasing little snippets, including these hieroglyphics, these kind of symbolic carvings that are on the walls, and they'll actually be kind of important to the story as things develop. So the eagle-eyed players will be getting clues to some of the content and the storyline behind the content as it proceeds if they kind of pay attention to the environment and some of the hieroglyphs that they'll see carved into these ancient locations. And
so very cool.
Yeah, it's kind of, the artists have fun with them, creating them, and it's a really nice added extra. It doesn't really add or take away from the gameplay, but it's something cool for those players that really love that extra depth and touch to kind of relate to the area and kind of try and poke and find its mysteries, so they can, they feel clever when they find out what's going on. And this is actually a hole in the ground, isn't it? It's a fissure that's opened up.
Yes. What happened is a sort of earthquake in the area has opened a fissure, I believe on the side of a mountain, and inside of this is a pathway leading to this city that appears to have been abandoned and ravaged by time. So without going into too much detail, the players will get to enter here and explore this.
Yeah, we're going to kind of focus on the gameplay elements here and kind of what we talk about, a bit about what goes into design, because we don't want to ruin the story for the players. There's a lot of very cool storytelling that'll go on in this location, and we'll talk about some of the cool tips and trips a little bit later. But we also don't want to spoil too much, so some of the key reveals and things we won't show. We'll give more a sightseeing tour of some of the landscape and the geography. But what we will do is let the guys talk a bit about this first encounter and this rather nasty and dangerous looking gentleman that we see in front of us in the middle of this room.
Okay, so this is the first boss of the dungeon. He is someone who wandered into this area, having discovered the passageway leading inside. So
he's a static boss, and the main key to the fight here is movement. In House of Crom, we kind of wanted to remove all the black holes, and here in Dragonspine, we're bringing them back.
What do you mean by black hole?
Black holes mean area of denials, kind of. So fire, get out of the fire. So basically, it's that black holes. Area of denial, where you have to move and keep keep moving, because if you stay on your spot, you're gonna eventually get damaged and you're gonna die.
Yeah, and so this guy's story is he's actually one of the local residents who's also wandered down here just like you guys have.
Yes.
Okay.
And what has he found?
Sorry?
And what has he found?
Story spoilers.
A little. Teasers, I prefer to call them.
He's not quite found what he's looking for, being a mage who craves the emerald lotus powder, but this is what he came down here searching for, until the players...
And so the emerald lotus powder will actually be an important element of the story all the way through.
Yes. Okay. And in this fight as well, as he calls upon his reserves and takes... consumes emerald lotus powder to get stronger over time.
Yeah, because it's one of the cool things we get to do with the license, because people in Conan's world are drug addicts, and they are drunk on both substances and power, and it's a kind of an ongoing storyline through all of the Conan literature. This kind of abuse of power and abuse of substance, and the kind of corruption of civilization, and the purple, the lotus seed in this is the kind of hook. Again, the hook to we always try and hook things into the kind of I guess the approach that Howard took to all of his stories, even when it's not a Howard story that we're adapting, that still having that sense of this is true to the Conan world and to the way that Howard's Hyboria is supposed to feel, with this kind of very adult and mature storylines. It's kind of what allows us to tell some unique storytelling, because you can't really do that in more, in a non-mature rated game.
That's awesome.
Hey, Craig, just to take us through, do you always do your checks and balances when you're doing ideas against kind of the Howard stuff?
Yeah, we pretty much do, don't we? It's always the core of our you know, we wouldn't do anything that we felt stretched too far from the kind of the spirit of Howard's world.
No, we have our lore experts that everything eventually goes through them, so we do have a sanity check on that. We do try to remain as faithful as possible.
Yeah, and I think eventually the team gets so used to it that you know yourselves.
Yeah,
you know, you don't stray too far because you've worked with Josh and the guys for so long that it becomes kind of second nature for us to like, how does this link it? And you know, so we don't go too crazy on departing from what makes the license so. You know, what makes Conan and what makes the license.
Yeah, most if not all of us have read all the stories as well. It's a very good source of inspiration.
And of course, we can't show the actual mechanics of the fight because this is a group dungeon that we're showing you around. And Jean is on his own here, playing through. So it's you're not actually seeing the mechanics that the players will have to engage, and we want to leave those as a surprise for when the players get through. And again, you can kind of see the odds architecture kind of feeling that it feels maybe a little Stygian, but it's also not. And it's very old. And this is also another avenue for storytelling where we get to bring in some Cthulhu, kind of some Lovecraftian elements. Cthulhu's not the right one. Lovecraftian.
Or Lovecraftian elephants would be cool too.
Listen,
that would be cool.
Craig's little slip is forgiven because Tower of the Elephant is hardcore Conan. It's cool. And it is very Lovecraftian, completely. So
yeah,
I think everyone, the fans will get it.
Yeah, and our writers, you know, it's a great being able to pull in those kind of these ancient evils and these old gods. It kind of brings another sense of kind of rooting things in the lore, and you know, obviously Howard and Lovecraft were great friends, and they shared a lot of information, and they communicated frequently by letter, as you did back in those days before the internet and Twitter and everything else. I would kind of love to see a conversation between Lovecraft and Howard today.
Yeah,
that would probably make for a great Twitter stream.
Yeah.
We need that. Someone needs to make Robert E. Howard and Lovecraft a Twitter conversation stream. So
we could have epic rap battles of history with the two of them.
I'm not sure if we mentioned this, but this is an internal build, and what you're seeing now is a work in progress. It's not the final version of the dungeon. Just as a general disclaimer.
Yeah, the artists again will be like, it's not quite done. I sit by the artists, and I'm kind of like, I can get up from my desk and kind of go, oh my god, that looks cool, that looks awesome. And then they're like, it's not finished yet, you're not supposed to see it. I'm like, oh man. Yep, so now we're moving on, and this is kind of where you start bringing one of the more puzzle-like elements into this dungeon.
Of which there are many, yes.
Yeah. And again, we don't actually want to ruin the puzzles or solve them for people, and we're on our own rather than in a team. So we're going to skip the puzzle itself, but we can show the kind of location. And I think if you look to your right, Jack, you can kind of see the whole dungeon.
That's one of the neat things about the layout of this dungeon is that you have several points where you're returning to the same central area, and you'll always have looming in the distance there a glimpse of what's coming.
Yeah, you can see something over there, can't you?
Yeah. Something's going on.
That's where Gandalf fell to the Balrog, I think.
Hey, don't cross lores.
Well, we already were talking about
That's true. That's Conan.
Yeah. So again, it's you know, I think our artists do such an amazing job with the Dreamworld engine and the technology and what we're able to do and the lighting and the atmospherics that this engine can do now. You know, these areas they just blow my mind whenever I walk past people's desks and see what they're working on, because they do such a fantastic job with these environments and how they bring them together.
I remember when we were at PAX, you were showing us some of this artwork for this, for this upcoming content, and you were showing me screenshots that looked like paintings, and that's I couldn't believe it. Like it was, it's beautiful what you guys have been able to do, and this engine has aged so well.
Yeah, and that was a conscious choice back in the day. You know, I think everyone knows that Age of Conan's engine was very high end when it launched back in 2008. And you know, that did cause some problems for some people running it, but now, you know, 4 years on, it's an absolutely fantastic decision for us, because, you know, I think you can look at our games and they are competitive with games that launched this month.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
4 or 5 years on, and our engine still provides some of the best visuals in the genre, which we're immensely proud of. And you know, the artists love it and that means they keep current and they're able to keep up and have their work be considered amongst the best. So it means that we get great artists to work for us, and they want to work with the license, which is fantastic if you think about it for a game that'll be 5 years old next year.
Yeah.
Sure. I'm curious if you guys could just walk us through the philosophy that goes into building a dungeon. You know, I mean, this really has a very strong visual style, and there's like little previews over the cliffs, and there's traps and puzzles and mobs and bosses. Like, what is your general philosophy each time your team gets together to design something like this?
Peter?
Well, typically what will happen is when we decide to make a dungeon like this, from a very early phase, we'll want to decide a sort of theme that we want to stick with for a dungeon, so that when we do level design, when we do concepting, we try to have one cohesive thing guiding us. For this particular dungeon, it was puzzles, traps, and things like that, of which are quite few in the dungeon.
An important thing that I try to keep in mind is that I'm asking myself, would I play the content I'm creating? So I need to make sure that every time I design something or I implement something, I make sure that I would actually play it, and I'm always taking the spot of a player, because that's what I've been before becoming a designer.
Yeah, we've all been players.
Yeah.
And I think it's always about trying to make it interesting. So, for example, the room that John is just walking towards, there's a floor in front of us here, and this floor will actually start to crumble and fall apart when the players walk through it, and they can fall to their deaths if they're not quick enough. And this is also a group area. And see, you're cackling evilly already, because you can imagine, and you know, I think Peter can elaborate a little on, you know, the kind of dynamics that this doing a group dungeon kind of brings into the equation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is fun about this, especially, is while you're a group, you're often in any game really, you're often working together in this sort of setting in a group dungeon. But I thought it would be interesting to have areas like this where you can have a short moment of messing with your friends and potentially making them fall to their doom.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting dynamic with players. I love to tell an old adage that we had from AO, and because you asked Garrett about, you know, what we consider and how we do it. There was an encounter that the guys, the team at the time, put into AO where there was a fence, an energy fence, which the players had to have a debuff to get through. They had to have a special protective buff to get through this fence. And the players called it the Darwin fence, because if players didn't remember to get the buff, they died. And that was natural selection.
There you go.
But then what we found was that players were dying who were absolutely sure that they had the buff on them. They're like, no, we didn't. And we couldn't find what was causing it to bug out at all. And we looked at it for days, kind of going, what have we missed? Why are all these players complaining? And we watched them, and they were dying when they had the buff just before they went through. And we couldn't figure it out for the longest time. And then we figured out that people in their own raid were debuffing them. They were cleansing them of the buff just before they passed through.
Yeah,
That's evil.
So they could then laugh at them for forgetting the buff to pass through the Darwin fence. And I love that story, because players are the wild card. Mm-hmm. They're what make the designs interesting for the guys, and the nightmare for the guys to have to consider.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I've ever done a Celestial Necropolis run where I didn't pull the bridge on people trying to cross it. So I think that those are the sort of things that stick with me.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the kind of, and you guys as designers have to kind of think of that all the time when you're making content, because you're like, what are the various elements that the players will bring that we haven't thought of?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
But we always try and have that theme, you know, there's something running through for each area. And I think one of the interesting things with this one is one of the debates with dungeons is always whether you have too much trash or not enough, or how do you pace the encounters. In Age of Conan, we've got quite a breadth of those, I think. We've got some with a lot of trash and some with none. So what do you got? How do you guys look at that each time that you know, when you come to make that decision?
Well, it's a difficult balance to strike because, I mean, trash will give you mastery. Trash will give you things that you experience that you want to accumulate. However, having too much trash is, nobody wants too much trash, and nobody wants little to no trash.
I think that trash is important because you have to have a pace in a dungeon. So if you have only bosses, there will be like the fact it's going to be epic all the way. It loses of its epicness. So if you have some trash, you have some downtimes, and then when it comes back to a boss, the fun is brought back. But if like Peter said, if you have too much, it's not good. It's boring. It's long. It's boring.
The trash can also be part of the fun too. When you're getting stomped on by bosses, sometimes the trash can actually bring your morale back up.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we use the trash as well to teach players mechanics.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if we have mechanics that we're going to use in boss encounters later on, we'll often introduce it in a soft way where the penalties for not realizing it aren't as harsh, or you get more time to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do. So then when you get it in the boss encounter, if you're smart, you're like, hold on, I've seen this before, and I understand what I'm supposed to do now. Mm-hmm. And I think we've done that a few times with the kind of using the trash as how we teach players about the buffs and debuffs and the tactics that they can expect from the mobs. So you're not actually seeing some of the bosses as well, because we're keeping some of the creatures and beings, I think, that live here are going to be under wraps for a while longer.
Being is a nice generic word.
Being is a good could be anything.
Sure.
Yes, but that big room we were just in would have been the second boss.
So
I'm gonna be honest. I think the dungeon speaks for itself. It's so cool looking.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bill.
Sorry. I was going to say, what's the target right now for this coming out, let's say, on the public test realm and then eventually live? I know you guys were talking soon, but how soon?
Yep, okay, we hope to have the first bulk. Dragonspine will effectively come in 2 or 3 deliveries, probably 3. And the first one will contain this dungeon and the major outdoor playfield, hopefully the big, the main new outdoor playable area, which will have many quests, and kind of like for those who played the Savage Coast, it's the same as the Coast of Ardashir in Tehran. So it'll be a very big, and this one, whereas Tehran was aimed at level 50 players, so to provide more content for people early in the game, this is very much for veteran max level players. So there'll be a whole outdoor playfield worth of content with this dungeon, and with 2 important systems additions, one of which is the crafting revamp, and the other of which is a secret that we will reveal on Friday in the dev letter, so I'm not supposed to say yet.
So you teased them, and now they're looking.
So I teased. There's another reveal on Friday. Read the dev letter. We do a monthly development update, and that'll be on Friday. But what we will say in that is that this content is aimed to that first delivery is absolutely going to be this year. We're working on. We have 2 patches to deliver before Christmas, 2 major updates. The first delivers the new Unchanged version of the Amphitheater, which is one of our existing dungeons, which has been revamped and added in a new mode for max level players, which was one of the requests from the summer survey that we did with players. We asked them which of the older content that was for lower level players would they like to see amped up and introduced for higher level players and for max level players. And the Amphitheater was one of the most popular choices, so that's one of the dungeons that has been revamped. That's currently on the test server, and that means that the rest of them are it's a chain. So once that is tested and out, then we should move the first of the Dragonspine content and the trade skill revamp onto the test servers relatively shortly after that, and then live it'll be some point in November. So it'll be whether it's the second week or the third week or the last week, it's hard to say right now. It might even slip into the first week of December. But we're definitely trying everything we can to make sure that we get the content, all those patches out this year. And then the other 3 or 4 areas for Dragonspine will come into content updates early in 2013.
Well, I mean, for free, how can anybody really complain?
Yeah, no, it is different. You know, we have previously charged, but you know, the MMO space is evolving all of the time. I love the atmospherics in our dungeon. Sorry, it's just
looks fantastic.
He's idling around flames, and the new lighting engine that we put into the Dream World engine last year just adds so much depth and flavor to it. It's always I usually end up stuck in the dungeons, just realizing that I've been sat there staring at my character for 10 minutes when I'm supposed to be reviewing them. Like, oh, he's cool. But yeah, so it is free, and with the way that the MMO space has evolved, I think that's becoming more and more important, and expectations are higher. And if you want to remain relevant as a 4 or 5 year old game in the modern marketplace and to modern players, you're going to have to provide a good amount of content for free and have your monetization in those other elements, whether it's in the premium memberships in Conan and the vanity items in the store. So, for example, we will have other armor sets that are available in the item store that are themed to be have similar cultural influences from Dragonspine and from Conan. So it doesn't even just restrict us to purely the stuff related to the Dragonspine story, which will be achievable through loot drops and that kind of thing. But we'll also have those vanity armors that we can do and kind of broaden and use Conan as a whole to kind of introduce some more different, diverse racial styles on the armors. Because I think that's one of the things that most appeals to players of Age of Conan, is the fact that we have this very diverse set of cultures that influence the game world. Whether it's the Egyptian-style themes of Stygia, the Persian influence that came through the Savage Coast content, or the Celtic in Samaria, and all of those different the Eastern influences on Katai that allow for very different flavors. And now that we have the vanity armor system and the ability for players' armor to not matter in terms of their gear and their stats, then it allows the players to express themselves and wear whatever armor they feel is like. So we always try and make sure that we're adding as much visual diversity as we can, and kind of using the fact that we're in Kashan and it's a new culture to add to the visual diversity that players will be able to achieve.
Have you guys found that most people are, I mean, in the item store, what do people actually buy? Do they buy the vanity stuff more than anything else? Is that something you've noticed?
I think it's a fairly even split between certain areas. So very popular items are things like increasing storage space and things like that. Then there are the consumable items that kind of speed up progression, whether it's XP potions or in our case, the File of Tranquility, which gives you a little boost in AA, and then the vanity armors. And it's probably about a 20-40-40 split. Okay. Because obviously the armor inventory expansions and things like that are kind of one-off purchases for people. They don't have to buy it all the time. They just decide when they're invested in the game and they want to expand that, they make that once off. And things like vanity armor are something that some people never touch, and some people buy everything.
I think it's awesome. Vanity armor, I think it's really awesome.
Yeah, it's a great system because it allows our itemization guys much more freedom, and it gives the players much more freedom when they're not worrying about how do I maximize my stats doesn't become linked to how I look. So you don't have this weird mismatch of different colored and different themed armors.
It's funny because there's a lot of companies that added the ability to do vanity armor later, and you guys are one of them too, because it is so much nicer to say, you know what, this is how I want to look and this is how I want to be powerful. Let me keep the two separate because I don't want to look like a hobo.
Yeah,
and it's true though. Bill's right.
So
go ahead.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the. That is something. I think vanity is something that some people really just don't care about at all, and you'll never get them to buy vanity armor. I think the average player kind of considers it if there's a really nice set that they'd like the look of, and then you have the collectors who literally want everything, who they want to have that choice of, I want to have every option available to me.
Yeah, I know those.
Yeah.
I spent hours outfitting my live character.
Yeah, we act all macho and modern and games, and then you're like, I just want to play dress up. It's one of the weird, it's one of the weird paradoxes of modern MMO design. We're not that different. It's because you do it. You sit, I can sit in the auction house, near the auction house in Tarantia, and kind of just watch people walk by and see the combinations that they've made now that they have the vanity system, and it's awesome.
Yeah, it's really nice ones.
They find the combinations of gear that you would have never thought would have looked good together. But from different cultures, and they've picked pieces out here and there, and they've made some awesome outfits just from mixing and matching. And the freedom of giving the players the freedom to do that is an awesome thing. It's something great.
I'm just curious. We're talking a lot about the vanity items and monetization and stuff like that. You talked earlier about the crafting revamp. Have you ever thought about kind of mixing and matching and combining all three of those systems together? So you have crafting, some kind of free-to-play sales on crafting items, but all in a vanity sense. Just curious.
If the question will there be parts of the trade skill system that'll tie into item sales? Yes, in some way, I'm sure we will do that. But yes, we won't make it linked to power. We have a very, we've never sold and gone into the territory of pay to win with Age of Conan's free to play, and I don't think we would do that with the trade skill revamp either. It's not something that we want to be trying to do. So those we will be using the item store to link into the trade skill revamp in some ways, whether it's in progression and time and just make things faster, or in vanity in making cooler stuff that no one else can make. There's definitely potential and options there too. We'll probably talk a lot more about the crafting revamp next month and stuff when we start to get it ready for test live. We've revealed everything to the players, and then it changed everything, and we've revealed it again to the players. So it's kind of one of those evolving systems that I think is going to end up being absolutely awesome. It's one of the beauties of having a 5-year-old game is you don't have as much pressure to conform, and you're allowed to experiment a little bit more because your player base is very loyal, and you're not having to worry about players know what the game is at this point. So you get a lot more freedom with the auxiliary systems to try and do stuff that the team really want to do and find interesting. So whether it's the approach to the dungeons that the guys take, or an approach to the system like the trade skill revamp, we have quite a lot more freedom, I think, as a 4 or 5-year-old game when we're experienced. And I know you guys, like Peter, you guys and John coming in and remember making your first dungeon as opposed to making a dungeon now.
Yeah, well,
there's a big difference.
Yes.
I'm gonna get beaten unless I ask. What if all these updates? PvP. Is there some changes coming to PvP with all this stuff too?
Everybody's asking.
Yep, no, that's always the question. Yes, there will be a new PvP minigame. It will be in either the second or the third installment of Dragonspine. So it'll be one of the ones coming early next year, and it will be a new. It'll be a brand new minigame map placed around the location, which will also be closely linked to the raid in the Palace of Cetrus, which is one of the locations that will be coming in the updates early next year. So we're currently working on the location and kind of working it up. There were certain things were done. Originally this was intended to all come in one and be a paid update. So when we made the decision to split it up and do it all for free and release the stuff we had ready first and then release it in stages, the Palace of Cetrus was kind of the last location we were going to work on. So both the raid and the PvP minigame will end up coming in either the second or the third installment when we get to those in January and beyond.
Interesting.
But there is also class revamp. I think when you're talking PvP, the systems have a big influence on that. We recently rolled out the the sprint and stamina revamp, which has had a very big influence on how the game plays out, positively so. I think most of the players have appreciated us finally fixing stamina properly. It was a very, the previous solutions we had for that, because it was a shared resource that not everyone had to use. So our kind of the halfway solution we had to implement a few years ago was that casters couldn't use stamina potions to regen it. Because they didn't have to use stamina for their combos. And it always felt like a horrible band-aid of a solution that we all hated, even internally. But we didn't have the time and resource to fix it properly at that time. And over the last 6 months, we did have the time to fix it properly. And the systems guys did an awful lot of work rebalancing all of the attacks for PvP and bringing in the new sprint resource so that everyone is equal. The bar that you can see on the screen now when John is running around the area, everyone has that resource and it's the same for everyone. So casters don't have an advantage over melee guys anymore, and melee guys only have to worry about the stamina for their combos, and they can sprint the same as anyone. So you've got this much more level playing field. So a lot of our PvP updates come in that systems side. I know the systems guys were here very late last night, still working on the final tweaks and polish for the Conqueror tweaks that are coming. That's in the patch with the Amphitheater. So in that free game update, the Conqueror class will be having quite a few new goodies in terms of tweaks and rebalances and some improvements to their feat build, which I think will be most welcome for them. So we're always doing those. Those are kind of the system stuff is kind of an ongoing. And also now we will be fully linking the crafting revamp into PvP as well. So in PvP, with the crafting revamp, players will be able to drop components that'll then be able to be used for trade skills. And those components will only come from killing other players in PvP. So they won't be components that you can also get from some other location.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so there'll be this new, that will also be able to add another. So is it a PvP update? No, not technically, but does it have a huge influence on the PvP that will play out and the incentive to PvP? Yes, it definitely will. Because when players are dropping potentially dropping unique rare ingredients, there'll be a really great incentive for them to take part in more PvP and actually kill each other to try and find these. And so this location is the final one in the dungeon, isn't it, Peter?
Yes. This is the last area. Jean is currently looking at something that is clearly not good.
That looks happy to me.
Yeah. Not a portal to the happy zone.
He's smiling.
This is an interesting encounter that I'm quite proud of. Something that we do when we're making new dungeons is try to mix it up a bit, try to find what kind of gameplay experiences at their core, what kind of new gameplay experiences at their core that we could sort of try to introduce. When we did Temple of Erlik, it was the same thing, with switching buffs around with the bosses and stuff like that. And for this one specifically, we'll be splitting the group in half, where both groups will have to protect each other across great distances. Not going to go too much into that.
I'm making him reveal more than he's comfortable with.
Because, I mean, half the fun is figuring out what you're supposed to do.
It'll have something to do with these dead dudes on the floor.
Yes. Yes, it will.
There's a reason.
Maybe with the giant jewels.
Yeah, it's foreshadowing there of poor players.
Should we take some questions, some more questions from the
Sure.
fans, or is it okay?
Yeah,
we
got a lot.
We got plenty here coming. One, let's just go back up here a little bit. There was somebody wondering about the PvP servers and how they seem to be lacking in population. Is there any possibility of merging them into a one giant PvE server or anything like that? Basically, what do you guys see on your end?
Well, I think at our end, the servers are. We are working on the single server technology, and we've been talking about that for a while, and it will roll out at some point hopefully early next year. It'll depend on, that's a shared resource. It's not just done by our team, because it's developed by the Dreamworld Tech. So it's one of those things I'm not always quite as comfortable answering on it because I don't control all the resources. Whereas with the game itself, I can answer fairly confidently because I know exactly what's going to happen. So the single server technology is already deployed in the secret world, and so we know that it's out there and it's working, and we do want to to make sure that we use it for Age of Conan as well. And the populations on the servers have actually been incredibly stable for the last 6-9 months. We're kind of comfortable with where the game is right now. That's a cool vantage point. We're kind of comfortable with where the game is right now in terms of it's got a very loyal following, and our number, the numbers of players playing the game is incredibly consistent. We still get thousands of new players every week, and we still have players continuing to play, and the numbers, we don't really see any major drops. We've had major releases like Guild Wars 2 a few weeks ago and Mists of Pandaria today, and it doesn't affect the numbers on a game like Conan barely. It's not even noticeable. If you were to look at a graph of our activity numbers and the number of players on the servers, it honestly doesn't affect us at this point, because we're at the loyal player base of players who enjoy the game and like it for what it is. And sure, they come and go. Some players come and go and they come back for new content. But we're kind of at that core of people who really love the game and love it for what it is. And so we don't, and that's great because it removes a lot of the pressures. Like I said, we don't worry that Guild Wars 2 comes out and suddenly half our players have disappeared, because that's not the case. But we do want the single server technology utilized fully eventually. And that means that players will be able to always pull from the entire pool. So mini games will be there'll never be any problem, because there'll always be people available to play them and things like that. It is in progress. It'll probably be the early part of next year, give or take. There still might be technical issues that I don't know about or aren't expecting right now that crop up. So it's always, with the tech stuff, it's always a little bit more risky saying, yes, it'll definitely happen now. And then, long term with the single server stuff and PvP, there's some really interesting stuff that we hope to be able to do in the future, like all the way up to maybe even giving players control over their own rule sets. Which just has so much potential that I get excited when I start thinking about it, and then the coders kind of look at me and go, that'll take some time. Don't look at me like that. But we have, we have the outline of stuff we'd like to do, and because effectively what single server long term will be able to allow us the power to do is, if we chose to, we could give people the power to decide who they play with and what rule set they play under dynamically, where they can choose that today I want to play in a PvP environment, today I want to play in PvE, today I want to play only with people named Eric from Pittsburgh, whatever. Or a password protected dimension just with their friends.
That's interesting, to be honest. So, and that kind of stuff would be across all Funcom products, wouldn't it? Or you just think
we could do it either for all or any or some. Yes. Okay. Once the single server technology makes that stuff possible. Not definite, but I'm sure the code team are probably now watching this, kind of going, I can't believe you just told people about that. But it is important because it's one of those things that we also need to gauge players. We've mentioned it, to some of our players in the development letters in the past, because we want players' feedback on it. It is a time-consuming thing to do, and it will be a resource-heavy thing, code-wise, for us to do. And so it's great to be able to get players' feedback on it, because we want to kind of know, is this something you'd really appreciate, or are we wasting our time, and should we just keep things simple and not look at systems like that? So it's always interesting to mention it and have people give the feedback, so that we know kind of, oh, actually there seems to be quite a lot of interest in something like that, or no, you're wasting your time, just bring the single server in and let us share a mini-game queue so that we can play with people across servers and we'll be happy. And if that's the way players end up feeling, that's what we might do. We might just say, okay, well, we'll just implement the simple part of it, and we can leave the more complex part for way down the line, or future generations. That's the beauty with an MMO. Anarchy Online is 11 years old now, and it's great that it's still running, and they get to do some fantastic stuff because of that freedom I talked about earlier. So, with Conan the same, we're starting to move into the territory where we can start to do some kind of cool experimental stuff if we want to, and if we think the players might be interested in us doing that.
That's the best place to be, really.
That was a very long-winded answer to the guy's question. I'm sorry.
well, we got another question. This one might be a little easier to answer. Sting asks, are new armor sets going to be better than Tier 4? Stat-wise?
It will depend. That's a subjective question.
Explain.
Explain. I'll try and keep it short. Subjectively, the answer is yes, but situationally. So there might be some armor sets that are better for some things with one of the systems that we're going to talk about a little in the dev letter, but we probably won't go, if you were to add up all the value of power in Tier 4, the more likely place you're going to see expansions to that is actually in the trade skill revamp, rather specifically than in this content. So you might see ingredients drop that allow you to go there, but you probably won't get individual there won't be a Tier 5.
Okay. Like Tier 4.4x, Tier 4x is what we'll call it.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to call them to, the trade, it's more about the trade skill revamp, and we probably will put some really powerful stuff into Tier 5. But the raids right now is probably going. We're kind of toying with. We're most likely to put the raid in 3.5, kind of the same as Turan.
Okay. Now.
And maybe toy with the numbers in the raid. So maybe looking at things like it being a 12-man, so that more players can have access to it easier. And make it that makes it a very different experience from the other raids that we have, because again, it's good to be able to diversify the experience. But will there be new powerful gear coming? Yes, but more likely as part of the trade skill revamp, because there will be lots of cool new ingredients and new recipe and new things to be able to make once that system goes live.
Okay. All right, next question is another good one. Is there going to be a Herald of Zotli revamp coming anytime soon?
There will be. Depends on your definition of soon. Will it be this year in the next 2 updates? No, but it is coming.
Oh. Okay, good. It is coming early next year, because I just want to give him a specific date to look forward to, because he seemed very sad.
Mages are the next.
Oh, that class.
Yeah, no, mages are the next thing that we're looking at. The Conqueror and Bear Shaman, I think, go out in the next couple of patches, and the mages then will get the lick of love, as it were, from the systems team.
That's such a cool class. I always thought the Herald of Zoltan was one of the coolest ideas for a class in the game.
Yeah, it's a very unique experience playing Herald.
Well, that was my first. Yeah. Before I even worked on the dev team, that was my first character. It was a Herald Zotli. I thought it was awesome.
It's very unique.
I think I was a Bear Shaman first, and now I do a Tempest of Set because I never die.
Bear Shaman are tough, man.
But yeah, so the mages are next in the cycle for people being able to, for the systems guys to get them. So yes, it'll probably be in the 2nd or 3rd installments for Dragonspine. They'll probably do the work this year. It just won't. It'll be in the updates that come out early next year.
Good. Well, I hope that makes him at least a little happy. And then the next question is: have you guys ever thought about adding a group finder, a guild finder, raid finders, all the kind of stuff that you kind of see popping up everywhere, especially with the adventure or the addition of a single server technology? Have you thought about adding systems like that?
Yes, and actually the single server is why we don't have it yet, because we talked about doing it about 18 months ago, and then the single server stuff came up that was being done for Secret World, and the engineering teams felt that it wasn't worthwhile spending their resources doing it for us in isolation, because the very core infrastructure of the way we handle servers and thus finding people and matching people up was about to change with single server. So now that it's in place, a group finder type functionality is definitely one of the first things we want to do with the single server technology once it's rolled out on Conan. So yes, we've definitely thought about it, and we actually have concrete plans, but the single server stuff has to come, the next stage of the single server stuff has to come first and we don't quite have an ETA for that yet.
Okay. Next one, we'll keep moving along here since I know we're already at 50 minutes. I want to make sure we get through a lot of questions. Is there still another larger expansion planned? This guy, Ditz Havoc, maybe, really misses the story side of the original, and he would like to see that return.
I don't, we're not going to do another expansion on the size of Katai. No. I mean, we need a dev team, 3-4 times larger than we have. Or we need to take 3 years and not release any content in between. Those were huge investments that brought that content. But I think in terms of the old world and the way that we're handling, I think, the content in Dragonspine is probably closer in that type of design than, say, in Katai, where it was very faction-based and you had the faction storylines. The storyline that you'll play through in Dragonspine will be much more akin to that kind of progression that you saw in the old playfields. So in subtle ways and in the way that we do the new content, yes, you will have that kind of story. There actually is a story that runs all the way through all of the content that's going into Dragonspine in quite a cool way. And the designers will really kill me for saying this, but the dungeons you might actually visit more than once, and they'll be different when you visit them for the second or third time.
Interesting.
They'll actually have changed, and your previous actions will have had an impact upon your return visits.
That's very cool.
So it'll kind of progress the story within the same location, where you'll get to go back after you've done what you did the first time and kind of see the consequences of that in a subsequent playthrough.
Okay, next one is from AoE Combos, and he wants to know, will natural mana regen ever be boosted? As it is now with the Bear Shaman update, he is incredibly frustrated and says it's a PvE drag on mana classes.
I think that's not live yet, and I think when people give it a chance when it is live, they'll see that it balances out okay. The system guys have put a lot of work in there to make sure that balance remains, and of course, there's always a little fear when something new comes out and it's changing the way that it used to work, and some of those things are rebalanced. But I think once people get used to it, they won't find it a pain, and the system teams are always willing to rebalance anything, whether it's regen or a stat or a resistance or whatever it is that might be, but we certainly won't do it before the content's even gone live with the new way, because you always have that knee-jerk, oh, I'm not sure about this, I don't think this will work, I've played it on test server, or someone, or the usual is someone else that I know talked to a guy who played with a guy who played it on test server, and it's way worse. The sky's going to fall if this update goes out, and it never does. But likewise, if they don't get it quite right, and we have to tweak it, and we have to bring it up, or we have to adjust the regen, or do something like that, that would probably be reducing the cost of the spells rather than looking at regen as a whole, because regen as a whole is something that happens for everybody, and that's consistent, and we wouldn't want to have to go and rebalance everything because we rebalanced for one class. So it would be much more likely that we tweak the abilities in that case if we see that the Bear Shaman, once players have got used to it, that's really the key. Giving the players enough time to actually get used to the new skill set and used to their new abilities, and not reacting on the first day's feedback, but reacting on the first month's feedback. Obviously, if there's a major thing wrong, we'd fix it. But usually what we find is after about 2 or 3 weeks, you start to get the really good feedback, the honest kind of, okay, now I've had a chance to see it, play it, I see what you guys were aiming for, and now we're getting somewhere, and okay, now I have some actual feedback, and then we get to see, okay, oh yeah, they maybe have a point, maybe we need to tweak this up a little here, or push this down a little. But what we don't really like doing is doing that kind of knee-jerk reaction on day 2. Yeah. Where people haven't had a good chance to kind of digest what's been given to them.
Okay, fair enough. Next question comes from Dronic, with an H at the end, says a lot of his friends don't want to try the game because they think the free-to-play model is limited. Have you ever thought about opening it up and unlocking some more classes and instances in the future?
Possibly. The answer is we will always do whatever we think is necessary to stay competitive.
Okay.
If we
That's the
feel,
short answer.
if we feel that opening up more classes would dramatically increase the number of players willing to come and try out the game, then we would strongly consider doing that.
Okay. And let me see here. We got plenty of questions, so let me just keep going.
Yeah.
They all came streaming in. There was a couple here that I thought we mentioned.
I'll go for it.
Well, one of them that I thought was really good. Hold on. Somebody was asking about Rangers. Do you guys have any plans on Rangers?
Okay.
Find it.
Well, not specifically right now. Like I said, like we answered earlier, the mages are the next class, the next archetype that will be looked at. And then I think because that'll kind of be a full circle. So once we've done the mages, we'll sit down with the systems team and then decide what classes or what archetypes we need to look at again after we've done the full round of revamps the first time round. So we don't really have any specific plans past the mages. That's kind of the regroup point. So once we've done the mages, it'll be sit down, talk with the team, decide where we need to go, decide who most needs attention, and start prioritizing the list from that point onwards.
Okay. Another one is, are there going to be new faction grinds with the new content also?
I think it depends what you call a grind, but no. I mean, I think that's a very subjective question as to what you consider to be grindy or not.
I don't think this one was a bad grind. I think you just meant, are there going to be are new factions to rep up with?
I mean, not in the Katai sense, no. There may be some faction. We may use the faction system to facilitate the telling of some stories and the progression of some quests. So that you have to have done a certain number of things to be able to unlock, certain quest givers. But that's not really the same as all the rewards being linked to faction as in Katai. No, we probably won't go down that route.
Okay.
Another good one here is, can we expect a new feat planner? It's really frustrating not to be able to share builds with friends.
That's actually going to be an in-game ability, which is coming in the next update. We never provided an external feat planner. The issue for players is that they used to share on a website, an external website that then got bought out and closed down. And there was no way after that for them to share their builds amongst friends. So what we've done is we recently introduced a brand new feat planner with a new GUI interface, and actually allows for multiple specifications, which we never had before. So the player can actually create multiple feat builds and swap between them. And what we'll be introducing in the next update is the ability for the players in-game to actually hit share and share that update, and their friend will be able to click on the link and open their feat build. So they'll be able to share the feat builds in-game, and it's pretty much done. I saw them doing a review of the GUI a few days ago. So I don't have the producer with me, so I don't want to swear blind that it's in the next update, but I believe it's in the next update. And Pear's going to kill me in the morning.
A lot of people.
That's all right.
But yes, I do believe it's inbound very shortly.
This is kind of a random question, and I doubt you can answer it, but why not? Is it possible that we'll ever see a new class in the future?
It is unlikely, is the honest answer. I like being honest.
Of them now, so.
Yeah, I like being honest about that. There's a hell of a lot of work involved in making a class and making all the itemization for them, and it would be a lot of work to add into the game that only a percentage of players would benefit from. I think that amount of work is better spent on a system that everyone would use, or a system that would benefit a far larger group of players than 1/15 of our player base. And I also think, the game with the number of classes that we have, we're already at a point where we have a good number of classes.
Yeah, absolutely. There's quite a few, more than many games, actually.
Yeah.
What is going to happen with all the materials that we've stored up over the years?
We're not 100% sure yet. There will probably be some type of trade-in or sale, and some of it. The more valuable stuff will be useful in the new system. So like the raid, the stuff players might have gained for some of the raid stuff, will probably be carried over into the new system in some form or other. And we will try and provide some form of conversion. Will it be 100% fair and 100% recuperate? Probably not. I hand on heart can't guarantee that, but the team will do the best they can to reward those that have significant stockpiles in some way with the new system. But the issue is the revamp is completely different. So there's literally no way to maintain the value from what you had to what will be. So the team will be doing best endeavors to offer people some form of conversion and or trade-in just before to try and be as fair as we can. But it is a reboot. So there will be, I'm sure, some people who feel a little hard done by depending on the stuff they had saved. But one important thing to mention is none of the items currently made are going away.
Okay.
They won't be possible to be made anymore, but the ones that exist in the game world won't be deleted or removed. So if people are working towards things and building stuff now, their best thing is to make it. Because the armor, the end result will still be valid in, we won't be removing any items when they won't be able to be made anymore.
Another guy was wondering if we couldn't get a hint on what the new mount might be like, or what it might be.
No, it's a very easy answer to that. I have done enough tonight that would get me killed.
Yeah, we gave plenty of hints already.
I have a really good theory that I'm going to ask you as soon as the broadcast ends. Correct.
The eagle-eyed amongst you.
But we will. I don't see any other ones that we maybe haven't really covered yet. I guess a question about the new PvP minigame. Can you say how many it'll be? Like 3 versus 3, 6 versus 6, 12 versus 12?
The intention for now is 6 versus 6, but we haven't absolutely decided. Once we've done with something like that, we generally take a look at it with the first play tests, and once we get the block out of the dungeon or the arena and we see how it feels. We generally we're aiming for it to be 6 versus 6, and then we'll see from the first playthroughs whether we feel that maybe it needs to be, we'd like it to be 12 versus 12 or something else. But for now, the aim is 6 versus 6.
Okay. Awesome. Is there anything else? Let's say, I guess we could sit here and take all these questions all day, but and I know these guys would love it. But is there anything else you wanted to show us or tell the folks watching before we completely wrap this up and send it off to .com for the video?
Cool. No, I think we've covered quite a lot today, and I hope hopefully we can do one of these again pretty soon. Off the back of, there's lots of new content coming for the game, and in particular, I think we'll definitely try and do one of these types of sessions when we have for the trade skills, so that people can actually sit down with the system designers, and we can have the system designers online, and they can chat, and we can talk about what the intention is with that system, because it's obvious, you can tell from the conversations we've just had, it's going to be the biggest impact on kind of the metagame and loot and itemization and everything else that comes with it. So it's a significant update.
That's a hint right there, folks, that we're going to be back with another one of these streams when Craig's ready to talk about it.
Soon. Cool. Thanks so much, guys. We really appreciate it. It was really, really good.
Okay.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Thank you so much for all of the information and not spoiling the dungeon. But for those of you who came in late and missed a lot of it, don't worry. We're going to take this whole thing and we're going to upload it to YouTube and upload it to MMORPG.com. And I'm sure Craig and all the fine folks at Funcom will go ahead and let you know when it's up there too. And like I said, stay tuned, and we'll have the next one hopefully soon. And thanks, guys. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everybody. It was a blast.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And someone's phone is ringing.
Thanks again, guys.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
Take care.
You too.